I'm Mirak Raheem. I'm a researcher and activist focusing specifically on the search for the disappeared.
First, if we are to talk a bit about the relevance of this International Disappearance Day, what are your thoughts on that and what is the relevance of it?
Yeah. The International Day of the Disappeared is commemorated across different parts of the world, and it is and came into being in recognition of the scale of this unique crime. And Sri Lanka, as we know, has experienced enforced disappearances from at least 1971, but with sharp spikes during the Civil War from 1983 to 2009 and its aftermath. Plus, we also saw it during the second JP insurrection in 1988 to 89. And this is a way for the state to recognize and demonstrate that this crime should not be repeated. Plus, it is also reminds us as wider society of how horrific this crime is and our responsibility towards families of the disappeared. And on that, it is really important to note that the families of the disappeared really have had the burden of speaking and on not just pushing the issue of their family members, but the wider issue of disappearances into the public spotlight. But with it, they've also had to carry the burden of accountability, particularly in the post-war context, accountability and justice. And therefore, this is a day which should serve as a reminder for us that families, we should take on some of that burden of the families and help amplify their demands without necessarily speaking over them. And that's an important kind of task that the day offers, and we should obviously use the Day of the Disappeared to try and get and to actively listen to what families are saying about what they want and how their rights should be recognized.
You have also done wonderful production work, but it was done in animation form, right?
Yeah.
It is a cartoon form. So what is the relevance of this form of using animation in it?
Yeah. So the idea of using the animation was to try and provide a different medium, also to open it up to a different audience, so that, because different age groups, different parts of society may find reading a bit more tedious, it's harder. So the animation, I thought, would provide an easier entry point. And obviously also I had a view on trying to get a younger generation to watch it. And it also gives an added element where families of the disappeared can view it, and they can also watch it without it feeling like this is not my story. That it gives them a level of deniability where they can watch it with essentially an additional lens, as it were. And even though it's talking to them, it gives them this position where this is not really my story. This is just an animation, a cartoon, and so it's working at essentially two levels in that way, to talk about a very hard and emotionally difficult issue, which is of the search and specifically mass grave investigations.
So in the animation, there was the reference to three main people. So what do the different reactions of the three people depict in this animation?
Yeah. So the three characters, the main protagonists, as they were, each of the short three stories, they're all women, and in a way it reflects how the burden of disappearances is often carried by the women. And this is not just unique to Sri Lanka, but across multiple societies. Even in Latin America, and it is often the mothers and the wives. And what it tries to show is essentially just the range of emotions and challenges. I'm not saying it's comprehensive, but some of it, of the burden of the search. And that's what it tries to do. Essentially, there are three storylines, and two of them are set in Sri Lanka. And these two storylines are about how does a family respond to news about mass graves, and the challenge that they face in a context where there's so little information available to them. And the second one, the second story, is set in a make-believe country in Central America, and there it is where you have a non-governmental forensic organization, and what we are observing through that is just a sheer amount of information on one hand that a family member has to process to carry out this search, but nonetheless what it also shows is that how it can be done, and it should serve as an example of that the search, it is difficult, but with the kind of correct structures, with the processes and organizations, it is possible to find out the truth. And so in a way, that's the balance that's kind of showing both the emotional but also the technical.
The process of identification and handing over remains is stressed in the second video. How important is that for families?
So I'd say, as a cliche, in Sri Lanka, we present the disappearance issue and family demands in this very stereotypical way as either it's for justice or for compensation. Instead of seeing it's a spectrum, that it is not either or. And if you recognize the rights due to the families that disappeared, it should never be an either or, that families have the right to justice, they have the right to truth, and they have a right to compensation, so that there is no need for them to choose between these. And what has happened is that because families don't feel they have this space to be able to even make demands without there being repercussions in how it will play out in, for instance, if you're asking for compensation, it is, even for them, they feel like then they're going to lose the right to justice. And that's unfortunately the kind of policy context that has also been created. When really the effort, the full energy of the state should be also to help families in their efforts to find the truth. Because at the end of the day, what is still unclear is what happened to these family members. If they have been killed, then the emphasis should be on the recovery of those remains and then to identify them, so that the remains can be handed over to family members, so that they can carry out funeral rites. Because in Sri Lankan society, one of the things, say if you take Buddhist families that disappeared, some of them still haven't given a dane because they're still waiting for confirmation. So it is both in terms of within the family, within the individual, but also within that community, there is no resolution of this. And we need to recognize that we should be able to support families for them to move on. And that's why it is really important to kind of assist families in this process and to give them the answers. And that's why this process of identification, handing over remains is so critical, but it's completely underemphasized in the Sri Lankan system.
So what do you mainly hope to achieve with your animation?
Yeah. So one of the things that I realized through engagement with families that disappeared is the complete lack of information that families have about what a mass grave investigation is and what does it involve, what is expected of them. And it is for that reason that actually at first I worked on a guidebook aimed at families, so that it's something that they could take home, read in the in the privacy of their own home, and learn a bit more. And in a way, the animation is an added tool that could work with the guide, where again the whole basic process is, it's a more simplified version to give essentially key steps in the process for the mass grave investigation process, which is from the discovery of a gravesite to its excavation, exhumation, and how identification is done. So to simplify, for instance, the whole process of what does it mean to give DNA, because people are very fearful that it means that somebody has to come, a doctor has to come, extract blood, and this tries to simplify it, says no, it's a painless process. It's just what is called a buccal swab. It's like it's less painless than doing a COVID test, and just to kind of simplify that. And I think others, what has happened is families disappeared really, they have no source of information. I've met family members who said they either try and Google to try and learn more about what this process is, and I feel like, you know, as Sri Lanka, so many years after disappearances, and where we should be really further on in efforts with the search, we really have failed to provide families that disappeared adequate information about what this process involves and what their role is expected of them. And so that is what the animation and the guide both together tried to do.
So you mentioned to me about the guidebook,
Yeah.
the accompanying booklet. What is it meant for?
So it is targeted at families that disappeared and also community level activists who work with families. And what it tries to do is to try and break down that process, to explain what are mass graves, how is it done elsewhere, and then stage by stage it tries to explain, as I mentioned, the process of how mass graves are discovered, what is the proper process for excavation, the exhumation, who are the kind of experts required for this, and the process of identification, and also the handing over remains. And what it tries to do is not talk to this process as if it is purely technical, but it also tries to relate it as the emotional challenges and social challenges, because you know, one doesn't go without the other. And for instance, to talk through the fact of what one might have to do when you get the remains, the challenges one could face in your community from religious leaders, and the various other challenges. So in a way to kind of mentally prepare families also, because besides it being a technical legal process which is very difficult from the family's perspective to understand what is actually going on, nobody really kind of talks to the emotions that family members sing. And so that is what this booklet also tries to do, to have this kind of dual approach as a step towards really trying to give families more information. And why is that important? Because families are such an integral part of a mass grave investigation process. They are the holders of so much information that will assist the process. But also it's a recognition of the rights they have over this process. And as a country, that's where we need to get to.
The state basically has failed to carry out proper investigations. So in the absence of political will as well as funds, what can be done?
Yeah. So that's a tough question, because there is a political will question. There is also the issue of lack of adequate forensic capacity, because at the end of the day, yes, we do have a couple of trained forensic anthropologists, but for this kind of task, you actually do need a team. You also just need other forensic specialists, including forensic archeologists, not just those who are archeologists who've had some experience in mass graves. And above all else, you need an approach also. So the idea that this is not about one expert coming to a conclusion, but this is that all the members of the investigation team, be it the police, the scene of crime officers, SOCO, the judicial medical officers, the archaeologists, and government analyst department, if they have to examine like bullets, that all of them have to sit together and come up with a joint comprehensive report. So it's also about an approach. And to get to that, we can't do it overnight, but you have to create the building blocks, and part of it is in the education, the training, and definitely at this moment, as other countries have done, is that you do need international technical expertise, which should be embedded into kind of national structures until we develop that full capacity. And that is really the only way that we will be able to kind of be able to investigate these crimes effectively and give truth to the families that disappeared, and also help advance the cause of justice and truth seeking in this country.
Thank you very much, Mirak.
Thanks.